Good morning. Please be seated.
Mr. Chancellor, dear Friedrich, we are working on a real peace for Ukraine. This is linked to our excellent teamwork in recent weeks. This diplomatic core work is an important investment in a free, secure, and prosperous Europe. We are taking on this common leadership role in Europe. We are taking our European neighbors with us, of course. The big ones, like the small ones. The Western ones, like the Eastern ones. And we all agree on this matter. Kiev needs a strong security guarantee. I imagine a broad approach, based on several pillars. It is good that we all agree on this, dear Emmanuel. And the most important pillar is that the Ukrainian armed forces need to be strengthened permanently. In terms of armaments, financing, and training, we are both responsible for this. Germany is a big one, and it will remain so. Mr. President, dear Emmanuel, do you consider that a trilateral summit with President Trump is still possible in these circumstances? Mr. Macron, Moscow is now reproaching you for the big insults. During our visit to Washington last week, we had the hope that the expected meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy would take place within the 2 weeks that have been discussed. And I have already noticed this week. There is obviously no willingness of President Putin to meet with President Zelenskyy. He is making preconditions that are too unacceptable. That sounded completely different in the telephone conversation with President Trump last week. I was not surprised by this, because it is part of the strategy of this Russian president to proceed in the same way. In this respect, we will now discuss again next week how things will continue. I am very much in favor of discussing the next steps carefully together with the U.S. government. And there must be a reason that Putin is willing to meet with Zelenskyy and possibly with other participants. And there must be a willingness of the Russian side to invite a ceasefire to such a meeting. I am not making any illusions. This war may take many months. We should be prepared for this. We are prepared for this in close coordination with our European partners, with the Americans, and also with the coalition of the willing. Emmanuel Macron pointed out that there are 30 countries in the world that are here in great agreement with Ukraine and are ready to help. And they are doing this very practically. And to keep this coalition of the willing together is one of our urgent tasks. I would like to say again that what we have succeeded in the last few weeks, namely to have a completely closed European position and to coordinate it with the American president and to develop a common European-American position from this, has been a great progress. At the moment, there is an intense discussion about further tariffs in America. I would very much oppose it if the American government could intervene to put pressure on other countries whose gas and oil exports are financed by a large part of the Russian war economy. I would like to say again that the efforts to achieve a just and sustainable peace are at the heart of our agenda. This peace is what we want, and what the Ukrainian president also wants. And I say this with all the more strength and solidarity after the recent days when the attacks have resumed forcefully in an unprecedented way for the last few months, when again Ukrainian civilians have been affected, and we can clearly see the gap between the positions in the international summits or with the other leaders of President Putin and the reality on the ground, shows how insincere this is. The next few days will be decisive, which will mark the end of the period we had given ourselves with President Trump and President Zelenskyy to get the first meetings, and we will continue to exert pressure for additional sanctions to be imposed by ourselves, and we are ready to do so, but also by the United States to force Russia to return to the discussion table. We cannot let others negotiate for Ukraine, so no negotiations without Ukraine on any subject. The second thing is that we have put together in Washington in the right order the discussions, first the security guarantees, before any discussion on the territory, and then it is a concrete military support that we continue to have through training, the transfer of equipment and capacity, and we will continue in the next few weeks in the short term, but it is also the construction of long-term support. A just and sustainable peace is only possible if there are security guarantees. We will speak one and the other to President Trump over the weekend. We will see on Monday what it is. I hope that this meeting will take place and will hold. I hope that the trilateral meeting will hold. If we had to note next week that once again, after months of promises kept, this was not the case, we will plead very clearly for primary and secondary sanctions to be imposed, which will force Russia more and lead it to return to the discussion table. You speak of the German-French reflex, but the subject of nuclear power triggers contemporary reflexes. I deny these qualifications. I am never rude or vulgar, but when one says that there is an ogre at the gates of Europe, an image that has been taken by several, I think it qualifies what the Georgians, what the Ukrainians and many other nations feel very deeply. That is to say, a man who has decided to go towards an authoritarian, autocratic drift and to lead a revisionist imperialism of international borders.